Welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched the last episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. I don't think I've caught up with the comments as yet. Hopefully I will do so over the weekend. And yes, apologies again for no episode of the show last week. As I said, family issues have meant that it's interrupted the natural flow of things. I'm hoping it's come to an end, although I'm not too sure about next weekend. There may or may not be an episode of the show, so we'll just have to see how things kind of fall into place over the course of the week. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about last week's episode. The last episode of the show went down really well. Lots of nice comments, thank you very much. Lots of views. I think it was certainly I think for the first couple of days after it was up on YouTube, it was the most watched video for quite some time. So obviously you enjoy the roundup videos, so I'll obviously attempt to do some more over the course of the year. But obviously new stuff happens, and it kind of gets in the way, and one has to sort of say, new stuff, let's review the new stuff, because it's always fun. And obviously, as you well know, any comments I do make on today's episode of the show are wholly my own and have no bearing or relevance to the company that employs me. But of course, I can never get away from the company that employs me. So there is obviously, a slight sales angle here. When I review stuff that I'm probably going to purchase with my other hat on. It's all part of the process. It's all part of not only sort of obviously wanting to sell the whiskies, but obviously promote them, get some information out there, and hopefully sort of spark some interest amongst you guys for purchasing them. And well, that's exactly what I'm doing today, to be honest with you. It just seems like we've now come into February, and suddenly sort of the whiskey industry wakes up. Well, not strictly true, I suppose. But these samples for today's episode of the show came my way actually in December, so a big thank you to Paul from Brave New Spirits. And I think this is the if you remember, go back and have a look back on some of the previous episodes, certainly last year's, when I actually introduced Brave New Spirits and their two ranges, the Voodoo whiskies and the Gorilla casks. And I was told that the Gorilla casks probably were going to be replaced, and I think this is what has indeed replaced that range. Brave New Spirits have decided to call it Cask Noir, and as you can see from the bottle shots on the opening picture, it's a sort of a film homage, I suppose. A bit of film noir kind of stuff now, and all of the bottlings have a sort of like a filmy kind of name, shall we say. I don't actually know whether they are actual films or not. I'm not a big film buff, it has to be said. I kind of watch them and pretty much forget them, to be honest with you. I mean, there's only enough space in my brain to actually contain whiskey stuff, and wine stuff. And that's about it. Everything else is kind of slightly ephemeral, I suppose. My brain doesn't have the capacity to remember everything. I mean, does anybody's? I mean, so kind of films and stuff like that kind of just go in and straight out. Some of them kind of stick around for a little while, but the amount of times that I'm asked, do you remember seeing so and so, and I go, well, yeah, I've seen it, but don't ask me what the hell happened in it, or don't ask me who was in it. I think it's obviously the only film that's kind of, I suppose, stuck in my mind, I suppose, would be Lord of the Rings, but then, obviously. But anyway, I'm talking waffle. Anyway, look, so basically, what we have is something brand spanking new. Now, yes, like I said, I got the samples in December, but getting the stuff out was kind of delayed. No idea why, but it's only now, as far as I'm aware, hit the shelves, although I know Brave New Spirits and Paul have been out on the road kind of pushing the Cask Noir range. So it's actually quite a large range. I mean, as you may well recall, the last time they suddenly appeared almost as out of nowhere with a multitude of bottlings, probably vast sums of money behind them, one imagines, and they've done it yet again. 12 releases in this range. I mean, just think about it. A cask these days not particularly cheap, and these are all single cask bottlings. I don't know the cask numbers actually. They are printed on the bottle, but the print is so small, and my eyesight is going. I swear to God, I can't actually read them. So, but. Yeah, that's an incidental piece of information. You can do with what you will. Yeah, right. Half a dozen I've selected out of the 12. It's like I said, sometimes I'm not going to say that sort of quality suffers when you suddenly sort of bottle a dozen odd casks, but you are always going to get some that, in my personal opinion, are slightly more successful, shall we say, than others. I don't think, from memory of tasting them, that there was a bad whiskey in the range. Just for me, there were only half a dozen, and these are the half a dozen that I'm going to concentrate on today, that I really thought they float my boat, and like I said, so the other ones weren't bad. They just didn't really appeal to me for one reason or another, and we're not going to dwell on that because I always like to sort of look at the positive side of things, and I like to sort of talk about the stuff that I do like and the stuff that a certain whiskey merchant may well be stocking. Well, is stocking. So anyway, I think I've waffled enough, don't you? So let's just have a look at today's lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the rise of the Badger clan. Where do they get these names from? I've got no idea whatsoever, but interesting. So it's an 11-year-old Dailuaine, bottled at 50.9%. and aged in first fill bourbon. So yeah, pretty straightforward. I was expecting all weird and wacky casks. Well, yeah, we'll get onto that in due course, but nice to see just a plain old bog standard American oak cask, because sometimes you just want plain old bog standard American oak casks, don't you? Anyway, bottling number 2 we're looking at is called Telfords Travels to Gascony. Now we are getting into the realms of weird and wonderful casks. So this is a 14-year-old Craigellachie which has been aged in a Pacharank cask, and you're probably going, what the hell is a Pacharank cask? Well, the title kind of gives it away a little bit. Not Telford, Gascony. Pacharank is a white wine, still white wine, made in Gascony. Pretty bloody obscure, it has to be said. I think it's made from things like Sauvignon and the two Mansangs, I think, Petit and Gros. You very rarely see it because it's, like I said, pretty obscure stuff. So, yeah, that got me kind of interested. It was like, where the hell did you get one of those casks from? But anyway, so a 14-year-old Craigellachie finished in an obscure Gascon white wine cask. Brilliant. Let's move on. Number 3, bottling number 3 is called Ruthie the Wanderer in Bordeaux. Yeah, and that kind of, again, here we go, gives the game away. Who Ruthie is, I have no idea, probably the owner's cat. And it's a 13-year-old Benrinnes, which has been aged in an ex-Saint-Emilion cask. Obviously, Saint-Emilion is an appellation in Bordeaux that makes red wine. And so, yeah, so we're kind of like I say, pretty much back to the sort of the whole kind of concept of the previous range, the Gorillas range, single cask, wine cask and all that kind of stuff. And because, as you probably remember me saying, one of the guys that is behind it was used to work for Murray McDavid, and so it's, like I said, it's got kind of Murray McDavid's fingerprints all over it to a certain extent. Bottling number 3 is really quite an intriguing one. Thankfully, just an American oak cask. It is a 28-year-old Rhosdhu. And again, probably some of you might be wondering what Rhosdhu is. Rhosdhu is something you don't see very often whatsoever. It was, at the time that this was produced, a single malt produced at Loch Lomond. I think since then, I think they use it for one of their blends, I think. if memory serves me correct. Or no, I think they use it for the barley mash that they pass through the Lomond still, or the column still. One of the two. Forget exactly. Someone's probably going to be able to tell me. But so yeah, but back in the day, it was an unpeated single malt that they produced there. They've called it Bonnie Banks and the Call of the Past. I'm assuming that the whole, I don't know, Bonnie Banks is. She might be somebody, I don't know, or it might be just referring to the banks of a river, I don't know. But obviously the Call of the Past is because it's a single malt that's no longer produced. Anyway, so bottled at 48.6%, and like I said, 28 years old, just wholly American oak. Now we're going to move on to two peated releases. This one is called Where the Eagles Watch. Now obviously I'm guessing that the eagle is relating to Ardmore, you know, because they use it on their as their part of their logo, if memory serves me correct. Oh, they're a clever bunch, this lot, aren't they? So it's a 9-year-old Ardmore that's been aged in an ex-Isla cask, and you're probably thinking, well, that's a bit unique. Well, actually it isn't. I've come across this a fair few times in actual fact. There's the market, there was a lot of these casks appeared on the market, what, about 3-4 years ago, I think now. They were about 4 years old at the time, I think, if memory serves me correct, and there's a couple of other merchants that have released this kind of stuff, and I liked it. I mean, I do like Ardmore. A bit of Ardmore is really cool, and then sort of, you know, just adding a bit more peat. Why not? You know, good stuff. You know, can't go too far wrong with that. So this is bottled at 58.3%. Last bottling of the day is again another one of those weird and wacky spirits from Loch Lomond. This is Inchfad, which is one of their peated malts. They've called it Secrets of Bonnie Banks, or rather Bonnie Banks' Secrets possibly. So it's a 17-year-old. This has been aged in a first fill Merlot barrique, bottled at 48.1%, and it's Inchfad. You don't see it that often. It seems it sort of kind of comes and goes. I mean, you know, for years, well, I wouldn't say it was a regular, but there were bottlings actually produced by the distillery itself, and then it just seemed to kind of disappear. Inchmoan and Inchmuir seemed to be the ones that they kind of favoured, certainly from the distillery's perspective. And Inchfad, whether I'm assuming it was probably still made, but probably wasn't bottled by the distillery and just used just sold off to blenders, one imagines. But yeah, it's nice to see a cask of Inchfad again. From memory, fairly heftily peated, so left that one till the end. So anyway, that's today's lineup. Let's kick off with the Dalmun then, shall we?
I see you, and it seems you're watching me.
Right, okay, so let's see what the Dalmun gives us. So bottled at 50.9%. That's a nice nose. So quite a lot of creamy American oak, white fruit, lime, barley. Quite well. No. Right, okay, so let's start with the Dalmun. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. 11 years old, first fill bourbon. Well, the bourbon cask is fairly noticeable. It's lovely, creamy vanilla, quite soft. It's not blanketing though. There's some nice white fruit, there's some citrus, there's a touch of barley. It's got that kind of robust, slightly meaty kind of spirit character. But it's got some lovely sort of tropical, almost kind of bubblegummy fruits as well. A little bit of earth as well. Overall, it's got a lovely kind of voluptuous, oh, can't talk there. Voluptuous kind of juicy, fruity kind of character, with some nice level of complexity. I like this. Let's see what that's like. It's got a nice progression. It kicks off with the American oak, sort of toffee ice cream. Then you get the sort of white fruit, apricot, grippy barley coming through on the mid palate. But it's got a lovely lingering sort of juicy fruitiness, touch of citrus, a little bit of earth. The oak is sort of coming back a little bit, but the alcohol kind of like just holds it off a little bit. The alcohol's also kind of giving it a slightly austere, slightly minerally feel as well, which again is kind of balancing up the oak. I'm going to put a little drop of water with it. I don't think it really needs it, to be honest. That brings up the fruit, actually. That makes it really, really juicy. That is lovely now. It's kind of almost kind of taken the kind of brakes off, I suppose. That's lovely. Palate's pleasant, softer, juicier, little short possibly, lacks that sort of grip and intensity on the finish, which is what I preferred when it was neat. But it's certainly a little bit more softer, it's more relaxed. So let's talk the elephant in the room, the retail price. There are going to be lots of sort of like, how much, you know, but let's look at this, you know, realistically. The price of whiskey has gone up. We know that. You know, sort of production costs have gone up, which has had the knock-on effect into the sort of like secondary retail cask market, etc., right? So we know that sort of your bog standard sort of distillery bottled 12-year-old is probably in or around the 50 quid mark. You know, there are some that are cheaper, there are some that are more expensive. So bear that in mind. This is, like I said, this is an 11-year-old, so it is, and it's cask strength, and it hits the shelf at $62.95. You know, yeah, okay, it's a bit expensive, but this is where we're at with the cost of and the retail price of whiskey. So nothing that can be done about that. You know, if you're going to sort of hang around and just buy stuff that's sub 50 quid. You're going to be looking quite hard for the really good stuff, and you know, you're just going to have to compromise. So we are where we are with pricing, I think, and you know, I like that. I thought that was a really good whiskey.
Can feel you, and I hope you feel alright.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the second bottling. This is the 14-year-old Craigellachie, aged in Pacharank casks. That is an interesting nose. That's a bit sort of weird and wonderful, but I don't mean that in a kind of negative fashion. It's weird and wonderful in an interesting fashion. It's edgy, it's sweet, it's honeyed, it's grapey. I mean, it's a kind of perfect encapsulation of the slight hardness you occasionally get with Craigellachie, going up against some winey, sort of almost honeyed fruit. There's a little bit of lemon. There's quite a lot of honey. There's a little bit of tannin. That the sort of grapey wininess is kind of starting to come through quite strongly. There's a little perfume note as well. It is an interesting nose. It is very unusual, and I think it's actually really appealing. As I said, Craigellachie sometimes can be a little bit towards the industrial side or end of the spectrum, and I'm always looking for something that counterbalances that kind of character. Whether in this case, it's definitely the oak, and it's interesting. It's not cheap bottle, it has to be said, and eyebrows will be raised at the $95.95 price tag, and you're thinking, what, for a 14-year-old Craigellachie? Obviously, obscure bloody wine casks cost an absolute fortune. I like it. It's, you know, I can see a lot of people kind of, you know, being put off by the price, but if you've got the, you know, the deep pockets and you like something that's a bit unusual, actually a baby. Anyway, let's see what it passes up. Again, like the nose, it is a bit heavy on the cask, less honeyed, more wininess. It's got some nice white chocolatey notes, dried grape, lemon, barley, edgy. Again, the sort of edginess of the spirit character kind of escapes the oak towards the tail end of the mid palate and into the finish. But again, it's got that sort of grapey, tannic kind of aftertaste. That is really quite unusual. I like that. I think that's a really interesting whiskey. It's a whiskey I could quite happily drink if I had vast amounts of disposable income, which I don't. But anyway, I'm not quite so keen on the nose now. Put some water with it. There is a slight sort of oiliness, which is kind of not quite soapy, but sort of almost kind of getting there. Still quite honeyed, sweet. I mean, it's kind of losing that slight sort of soapiness, it has to be said. And I don't remember that from the first tasting, but let's see what pass on. Softer, a little bit less cask, possibly a little bit more barley, a little bit less kind of of the sort of industrial Craigellachie kind of character. Softer, longer, less fun, it has to be said, when you put some water with it. I really don't think it needed the water. But yeah, neat. I really liked that. I thought that was an excellent whiskey. Right, okay, so let's move on to the next bottling. This is Ruthie the Wanderer in Bordeaux. So 13-year-old Benrinnes aged in a Saint-Emilion cask. Let's see what the nose gives us. Raspberry candy floss. Okay, it's not. No, I mean it's not overly sweet, but it does remind me of raspberry candy floss. And then we start to move into the slightly more serious end of the spectrum. We've got some maltiness, some beery kind of berried fruits, some darker red fruits, a little bit of spice, coffee. It's quite a chunky nose, it has to be said. I mean, again, Benrinnes is sort of a bit of a chunky malt, and the character of the spirit is definitely evident. Along with the cask character, I quite like that. Again, it's quite appealing. I mean, like I said, that sort of slight candy flossy, is slightly ephemeral. It has to be said. It does kind of come and go fairly quickly, and then you're into the sort of like the more serious stuff. Yeah, I like this. 75.95 retail. Yeah, I can live with that. Let's see what the pass like. That's a lovely palate, actually. Really silky and soft to start off with, and then you just feel the tannins and the spices are kind of building onto the mid palate, as is the malt, the richness, the darker red fruits. It's quite masked on the finish, it has to be said, although you don't notice the alcohol. I mean, it's what, 57.2, until you get into the mid palate, and the sort of like the juiciness of the fruit starts to sort of like drop off a little bit. It's got a nice kind of chewy, almost kind of Weetabixy kind of aftertaste. I like that. Again, I like the progression. I like how it opens up with the cask, and then sort of like, the spirit just starts to come through on the mid palate and into the finish. That's impressive, it has to be said. I really like that. Let's see what a little drop of water with does. Again, I think I prefer the nose neat. It's kind of brought out a slightly more perfumed red fruit kind of note, but it's also brought out some quite juicy fruit as well, and and possibly a little bit more sort of the cask. Let's see what that's like. Palate is more maltier in actual fact. Again, not quite so heavily cask influenced at the beginning. More spirit character, more maltiness, more rich fruit. I think you can sort of take it or leave it with or without water, to be honest with you. I think it works quite nicely with both. And yeah, I like that. That's good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the old Rhosdhu. So thankfully, left in Bourbon. You know, not that I'm saying that the other ones are bad, but you know, sometimes there's a time and a place for weird and wonderful wine casks, isn't there? Ooh, that's a lovely nose. Wonderfully mature, lots of sawdusty American oak, barley, citrus, white fruits, nippy spice notes as well. Touch of gooseberry, some green gage. I'm getting sort of green fruit, green apple. A little bit of that sort of rose petally note, you know, the sort of the kind of Lomond signature kind of rose petal. Bit of vanilla. Now, deep breath. 215 quid, I think. 215.95. Yeah, you're probably going to go, ooh, that hurts. But you know, this is a bit of history, you know, and it's a bit of gorgeous history, it has to be said. It's got that lovely lightness to it, that citric character, that sort of sawdusty American oak. It reeks of age, it has to be said. And I think I wouldn't have actually wanted to leave this an awful lot longer, to be honest with you. I think they've bottled this just about at the right time. Let's see what Ted Pat's like. That's gorgeous. Mature, sawdusty oak, again the citrus, the white fruit, lime, lemon, barley. Again, that slight sort of, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying funky rose petal, but there's that little bit of rose petal. It's just that I always seem to pick up that in Loch Lomond. And length is just absolutely stunningly good. I mean, it's really long, minerals, white fruit, white chocolate, barley, a little bit of spice again. I mean, that is just lingering and lingering. The sawdusty oak is just, it's just noticeable throughout the palate. It kind of like just sits underneath all that kind of lovely spirit character. And yes, it's horrendously expensive, and yes, the sort of likes of you and I are probably not going to be able to afford it, but if you can, you're going to buy a beautiful whiskey, it has to be said. The guys found an absolutely stunning cask, that's all I can say.
Last whispers, it makes me feel alright.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the Ardmore. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Really manure, stinky, green peat, herbal peat, bog myrtle, more peat. It's a rum old peat fest, it has to be said. There's even that sort of coastal astringency there, you know. Oh, yeah, that's stunning. I mean, that really is absolutely stunning. Big gobs of peat. Alright, you could argue that it's a little bit simplistic, that that's pretty much all it's delivering. And alright, there's a little bit of green fruit and a little bit of kind of almost kind of herbal meatiness. But you know, it's 9-year-old Ardmore, and Ardmore. It's just Ardmore, isn't it? You know, it's Ardmore with sort of like emphasised peat. Now this retails for, again, £79.95, and you're going to go, how much for a bloody 9-year-old? It's fun, I can tell you that. See what the pal's like. peat. Funny that. Briny, white fruits, medicinal peat, herbal peat, earthy peat. I mean, we're not kind of talking optimal levels of peat complexity, but you know what? That's got quite a nice complex array of different peat flavours. I'm getting, oh, what the hell are those crisps called? Frazzles, kind of smoky bacon kind of character. I mean, that is stunning. I mean, that really is a great whiskey. I love that. Even at sort of 58%, you know, all right, yes, you can, it tastes like 58%, but it's certainly not intrusive in any way. It kind of just emphasises all that different peat character, and oh, I love that. You know, let's put a little drop of water with it. It's probably going to sort of like drop off the peat a little bit. It's a little bit fuller, it's a little bit more citric, a little bit more barley, less peat. Even a touch of honey as well, possibly. Pretty much like the palate, not quite so heavily peated, but the peat is still there. You can still taste it. It's not going anywhere, frankly. There's a little bit more sort of barley character, some minerality, some citrus. Personally, I would drink that neat. I mean, that is just so much fun neat, it has to be said. So I like it. I think it's a bloody good whiskey. Right, okay, so on to the final whiskey of the afternoon. This is the 17-year-old Inchfad. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Oh yes, that's funky old Loch Lomond. Boiled raspberry sweets, sheep poo, astringent herbal peat, white fruit, touch of sulphur as well. Yeah, spirit sulphur, not cask sulphur. Oh my God, that's edgy and funky and poor. Yeah, that's a kind of an experience, I think, is the terminology. I love it. I mean, people love-hate kind of thing with peated malts. I mean, then you chuck in a bit of Lomond funkiness, and well, I love it. I mean, it kind of, it's just so off the charts and off the scale. It's just kind of just incredible. I just love it. I mean, I bang on about sort of distillery character and spirit character and all that kind of stuff, and well, this has it in absolute spades. You might hate the character of the spirit, but my God, this has it in absolute spades. Getting a little bit of sort of red jammy fruit from the Merlot now. I mean, it's not quite a car crash of a nose, it has to be said. It's relatively civilised. I mean, relatively civilised. It's great. Let's sort of pass like. Okay, it's not quite so leery on the palate, it has to be said. It's a little bit more, well, it kind of opens with the Merlot kind of character. Soft black fruits, earth. It's not quite so funky. It's got sort of a little bit, the funkiness is under more control. It's got that sort of slightly astringent peat, sort of a herbal peat, touch of tannin, a little bit of grip. Some lovely spices. Don't think it needs any water. It's 48.1%. Yeah, like I said, it's got a little bit of a weirdness on the palate, but it's not quite as weird. And you know what? I love that. That's a great finish. Right, okay, So let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, a big thank you to Paul and all the guys at Brave New Spirits for the samples for today's episode of the show. Yeah, some really good stuff. I like the Dailuaine. I like the sort of the fact that it had, although it was first fill bourbon, it had the noticeable bourbon character, but it also had plenty of distillery character, and you can't argue with that. The Craigellachie, yeah, weird wine cask, why not? A little bit on the expensive side, but like I said, obscure wine cask obviously cost an arm and a leg. Really liked it, thought it worked really nicely with the slightly more, I have had some Craigellachie that isn't particularly industrial, but a lot of it does tend to come across a little bit industrial, nicely balanced, I thought. Benrinnes, again, really good balance. Plenty of sort of like, rich, sort of meaty kind of full-on Benrinnes kind of character, and, some notes from the cask. All round, really, really well balanced. The old Rhosdhu, well, like I said, it's a sort of like an echo from the past. American oak, no mucking about with it. You don't really want to muck about with something that lovely, and I'm glad they didn't, because it is a gorgeous whiskey. And for the same reasons, well, the Ardmore is just peat fest. You love your peat in all its various guises and sort of elements, then you're going to absolutely kill for that. That was just a gorgeous whiskey. And the Inchfad, again, if you like it a bit weird, if you like it a bit sort of like unusual, you have a bit of a fetish for this kind of sort of stuff, oh, you're going to love it. It's not everybody's cup of tea, I will give you that, but, oh, I loved it. Great stuff, as they say. Anyway, that's today's episode of the show in the bag. Well, I thought it was a whole load of fun. I hope you guys sort of enjoyed it. Until next time, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.